Hello viewer, a warm welcome to Elimu TV where you watch and learn. I'm a teacher, Madam Christine Okot, taking you to the sixth lesson of biology. Welcome, and let's have a preview of what we're going to discuss today in our lesson. First, we're going to look at the previous assignments. We're going to define classification. We're also going to define taxonomy. We're going to look at the significance of classification. We're going to look at the 5 kingdoms, and lastly, I'm going to give you an assignment. So the previous assignment, which was on the video that you watched, you are supposed to list down all the external features that you have observed from the different animals. So these are just among the external features which were from the video. There's some animals that had fur, scale, the skin, the paws, the claws, the limbs that are used for walking, the trunk and the tusk which were in the elephant, the beak and the feathers which are found in the different birds which were in the video. The second question was group the animals using the 5 subgroups we have in the animal kingdom. So the 5 subgroups, they just fell under the 3 subgroups in the animal kingdom. The first one was the birds. Under the birds, from the video, we had the geese, the duck, and the flamingo. From the reptile, we had only the alligators, and from the mammal, we had the bear, the giraffe, hippo, the lion, tiger, anteater, elephant, gorilla, koala, cow, pig, and finally, a horse. So that was the assignment. So let us start by defining what biodiversity is. This is the measure of the variety of organisms present in different ecosystems. We have various types of ecosystems. For example, we have the aquatic ecosystem. We have animals that live on the land which are called a terrestrial ecosystem, and there are animals that live on air. So biodiversity briefly just means the variety of species we have in the different ecosystem. For example, in our illustration, we have different types of biodiversity. For example, we have the genetic biodiversity. This means it is the genetic variation or diversity within a given species. So that is a species of a plant, and there are very many of them. Then we have species diversity. So this is diversity between different species, that is in animal. Then we have also ecosystem biodiversity. This is difference within the habitats which these organisms live in. So biodiversity is simply the variety of organisms present in different ecosystems. So we look at classification. We start by defining what classification is. So what is classification? This is the orderly arrangement of organisms into groups basing on their similarities. We can also say that classification is grouping of organisms according to their structures and the way of life. Structures here would mean either the internal structures or the external structures. And finally, we can say classification is the grouping of organisms based on their similarities or difference in their characteristics. For example, we have an illustration of different organisms. We can classify them according to their structures, which are either external or internal. And then we can classify them according to the way they live. For example, we have a frog, we have the fish species. So the fish species, they live in aquatic ecosystem. They have gills, so we can classify them regarding with their external structures, which are the scales, the gills, and the fins. So they are in a different set of group, which is the fish species. The amphibians, these are animals that can live in both land and on water. So they have the lungs, they have developed lungs, so they can either live on land or water. So we classify them based on what they have, either internally or externally. So there are some terms we're going to define on classification. The first term is taxa. because classification deals with grouping of organisms. So these groups of organisms are what we call the taxa. So taxa, this is the group of classification. In singular, it's called a taxon. In plural, it's called a taxa. Then, moving forward, we have what we call taxonomy. So this is a branch of biology that deals with grouping of living things. Next, we go to taxonomists. So these are scientists who work in the field of taxonomy. So it starts with taxa, the groups, then the branch of biology that deals with the taxas, then the person who studies that specific branch we call him or her a taxonomist. So that is the hierarchy in which it goes. It starts with the taxa, the specific group, going down to taxonomy, the broad branch of biology that deals with grouping of organisms. Then finally, the person who studies this branch of biology is what we call him or her a taxonomist. So now we have known what classification is. Why is classification important? We're going to look at the significance of classification. The first significance, it helps us understand the characteristic of living organism for easier study. It also helps it's easier to identify relationships between groups of organisms by comparing similarities and differences between the organisms in the same way. So we have different types of species. So in classification, it helps us to be able to easily identify an organism where it comes from. So there are some organisms, maybe you have never seen them or you have never heard of them, but by using classification, you can be able to learn about them. For example, the first illustration there, a very strange animal which is found in the deep seas ocean. It's called a blobfish. This is it's a deep sea fish. It inhabits the deep waters found in Australia and Tasmania as well as the New Zealand. It is shorter. It can be less than 30 centimeters. The next organism we have, it's a squid. There are 304 species of squid. It is among the largest invertebrates that are found on Earth. The next species is what we call a whale, very common. This is a marine mammal. The blue whale is normally 98 feet, that is the height. The weight is up to 173 tons. It is the largest animal and the heaviest known to have ever existed. Then lastly, we have what we call the gulp eel. It is found in deep sea water. It has a very big mouth, normally known as the umbrella mouth. It can grow up to 2 meters. So by looking at this organism, most of them are aquatic, but it does not mean if an animal is aquatic, it's supposed to be classified under the fish. So there is a lot of diversity in the aquatic organism. So these are just among the organisms that classification help us to identify them using either their similarities or the difference which is between them. Another significance of classification, it helps us to arrange information about living organisms in an orderly manner to avoid confusion that may arise. It also helps us in identification of living organisms into their correct groups of reference. So classification is just like a library which has been properly arranged. You can imagine if you're going into a library and it's all messy, there's no direction of where you can get a certain book. So you'll have to waste a lot of time looking around for what you're supposed to get. So by classification, it helps us so that we can be able to arrange. If an organism belongs to a mammalian, it belongs to mammals, you can easily go and identify that animal. If the animal is an invertebrate, it is very easier to identify it. So classification is just like the arrangement, the orderly arrangement that is found in a library. For example, you can look at our illustration of a neat library which has been arranged properly. So if you want to go and look for books which belong to science fiction or they belong to the humor class, So you can easily identify such book at an easier pace. So those are some of the significance of classification. Now, classification comes with its own units. There are different units of classification, or we can call them the hierarchy of classification. So this is just a sentence that is going to help you to remember the units of classification. It goes like this. King Philip came over for great spaghetti. So you take the first letter of each word to mean, for example, the K will mean a kingdom, P is a phylum, C is a class, O is an order, F is a family, G is the genus, and S is the species. So we're going to have a video on a rap song that is going to help you identify this hierarchy or the units of classification. So here's the video.
Organisms. Well, let's see if Mr. Simons can help.
1, 2, 3, 4. King Philip Papa Bread, and he got said. Yeah. King Philip Papa Bread, and he got said. Yeah. King Philip Papa Bread, and he got said. It's the kingdom, violent class, and order, family, genus, down to species. King Philip Papa Bread, and he got said. Yeah. King Philip Papa Bread, and he got said. Yeah. King Philip Papa Bread, and he got said. It's the kingdom, violent class, and order, family, genus, down to species. Let me rack your brains with scientific facts and wisdom, and I promise I won't charge you much or take your personal income. What comes first? I wonder what can I bring them? It all started off when we grouped them in the kingdom. Take it down a notch and get it even more precise, cause the phylum is an extra going down to lower heights. Class is even more specific, even more concise. It's a grouping right above order. Wait, 3 more types. King Philip Papa Bread, and he got said. Yeah. King Philip Papa Bread, and he got said. Yeah. King Philip Papa Bread, and he got said. It's the kingdom, violent class, and order, family, genus, down to species. King Philip Papa Bread, and he got said. Yeah. King Philip Papa Bread, and he got said. Yeah. King Philip Papa Bread, and he got said. It's the kingdom, violent class, and order, family, genus, down to species. So you see, I see, there's all sorts of hype when looking at an organism trying to describe one big family, but not too big tonight, cause we have to be specific to make it open right. So yeah, oh yeah, we always have to try to classify an organism perfectly right. Genus is the next word where the difference is slight, and we end it tonight with the single species type. Yeah. King Philip Papa Bread, and he got said. Yeah. King Philip Papa Bread, and he got said. Yeah. King Philip Papa Bread, and he got said. It's the kingdom, violent class, and order, family, genus, down to species. King Philip Papa Bread, and he got said. Yeah. King Philip Papa Bread, and he got said. Yeah. King Philip Papa Bread, and he got said. It's the kingdom, violent class, and order, family, genus, down to species. So yeah, oh yeah, we always have to try to classify an organism perfectly right. Genus is the next word where the difference is slight, and we end it tonight with the single species type. Yeah.
So I hope you have enjoyed that video on rap song, and you're just not supposed to enjoy and nodding your head and dancing, but I hope you have got something that can help you to identify the units of classification from kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and finally with the species. So those are the units. The biggest one is the kingdom, then it goes down to phylum. So it decreases in similarity and increases in the number. So the number of the species, it decreases in similarity while it increasing in the number of species. So we first start with the kingdom, which is the biggest class. Then we go to phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species is the specific organism. So let us define each unit of classification, starting with the kingdom. So this is the highest taxonomy group. It is made up of several phyla. The second unit of classification is phylum. It is made up of classes with similar characteristics. In plants, we call it a division, while in animals, it's called a phylum. The next unit of classification is what we call a class. They consist of orders that have similar characteristics. Fourth, we have the order. It consists of families that have common features. And the fifth one is the family, which is made up of genera, in single there, genus, that share the same general characteristic. From family, we go to genus, which is made up of species that share the same general characters. And finally, we have the species. This is the smallest unit. So remember, we define a species as a group of organisms that can freely and naturally interbreed to give rise to fertile offspring. So the units of classification can also you can also use this to help you to classify them. For example, if you have the address information, you can link it to the classification group. For example, if a student X lives in a certain place down the village is Zoya, so we start by classifying him or classifying it and linking it to the classification group from the biggest, which is the kingdom. For example, the kingdom, which is the biggest, is you can compare it to a country. In this case, the biggest unit here is Kenya. So that student comes from country Kenya. It is like the kingdom. Then next you go to phylum, which is like a county. So the phylum on which this specific student comes from is, let's say, Bungoma. Then going down, you have the class. A class is the same like a district. In this case, the student comes from district called Bungoma North. Then down as you go, it's under order. Order is like a division. Student comes from a division known as Tongarin. Then from the order you go to family. A family, you can liken it to a location, which in this case, let's say it is Dalu. Then from the family you go to the genus. A genus, you can liken it to a sublocation, in this case, which is Dalu. Now, the last unit of classification, which is species, you can also compare it to the village. Now, the specific village in which this student comes from. So the village is Zoia. So you can just compare. A country is like the kingdom, the biggest. The county is like the phylum, following the order. The district is like the class. The division is like the order. The location, like the family, sublocation, genus, and finally, the village, the specific place, is like the species, which is the specific organism. So let us look at an example. For example, we want to classify a human being regarding using the hierarchy of classification. So we start from the kingdom. A human being comes from the kingdom Animalia. So these are organisms which are able to move their own body. And it is an animal, it's an animal because it is not able to make its own food. Then, going to the phylum, it belongs under the phylum we call the chordates. Chordates are animals that have a backbone. From chordates, you go to a class. A human being belongs to a class we call the mammals. Why? Because these are the chordates with fur or hair, and they have the milk glands, which are the mammary glands. From the class, you go to the order, which is the primates. So these are mammals with collarbones, and they have the grasping fingers. From the order, you go to the family. The family is hominids. These are the primates with relatively flat faces and three-dimensional vision. That really describes a human being. From the family, you go to the genus. The genus is Homo. So these are hominids with an upright posture and large brains. So human beings have a large brain capacity compared to other hominids. Then the species, which is the specific organism, is what we call now the Homo sapiens. So this is a member of the genus Homo with a flat forehead and a thin skull bone. So we have classified a human being from the kingdom up to the specific organism or species. So the species of human being is what we call a Homo sapiens, which is a scientific word. Another example, we can find this example you see in our video, which I'm going to introduce to you for further classification.
Classification of living things. What do a worm, a cat, a fish, a bear, a lion, a tiger, a deer, and a tree have in common? They are all living things. With so many living things in the world, scientists have created a way to organize life into groups and give them names that are recognized worldwide. So if you ever find yourself in China at a zoo looking to see the lions, and there is nobody there speaking your language, what are you supposed to do to ask to see the lions? Scientific classification's grouping of organisms can help you determine a lion's scientific name. From general to specific, the levels of classification are kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. A lion belongs to the kingdom Animalia, a group that includes all animals. So in our group of organisms, the tree would not fit into this grouping. The phylum that the lion fits into is called Chordate. This is a group that includes everything with a backbone. The worm would be eliminated from our group because of its lack of a backbone. Class is the name of the next level of classification. The class that the lion belongs to is called Mammalia. Scientists use Greek or Latin words for the levels because they are understood everywhere. Mammalia means mammal, or animals with hair or fur. The fish is removed from our group because it's not a mammal. Order is the name of the next level, and the order a lion belongs to is called Carnivora, which means meat eating. The deer is not a member of this order, and he is removed. Next, we have family. A lion is in the Felidae family. Members of this family have retractable claws, so the bear is removed. Then we have a level called genus. A lion is in the genus Panthera, which means roaring cat. The house cat does not roar, so it is removed. Finally, we have the level called species. Members of the same species can breed and produce offspring. A lion is in the species Leo. So the tiger is removed from this group. So a lion is an animal with a backbone that has hair or fur, eats meat, has retractable claws, can roar, and goes by the name Leo. The lion's scientific name is Panthera leo. Scientific names are an organism's genus followed by its species. So a lion is Panthera leo. So if you ever find yourself looking for lions at a zoo in China and nobody there is speaking your language, all you need to do is ask to see the Panthera leo, and you will be sure to see the lions. Classification of living things.
When we classify living things, we sort them into groups. Each group's called a kingdom, and there are 5 for us to choose. If something has one cell, like the bacteria of a cold,
If it's unicellular in the Monera kingdom, it must go. If it's more complex, like an amoeba in a pond, unicellular or multicellular in the protist kingdom, it belongs. When we classify living things, we sort them into groups. Each group's called a kingdom, and there are 5 for us to choose. If it can't make its food, like a mushroom or some yeast, if it's a decomposer in the fungus kingdom, it must be. If it photosynthesizes like a plant with leaves and roots, if it's a producer, the plant kingdom, we must choose. When we classify living things, we sort them into groups. Each group's called a kingdom, and there are 5 for us to choose. If it can't produce its food, like a lion or a snake, if it's multicellular, the animal kingdom is its place. When we classify living things, we sort them into groups. Each group's called a kingdom, and there are 5 for us to choose.
So those are the 5 kingdoms that we have, starting with the Monera, Protista, fungi, plantae, and animal. We're going to look at each of these organisms in the next lesson. So our assignment for this lesson is going to be 1. What is biodiversity? Question 2. What is the name given to the process of grouping organisms? 3. Part A. Name the branch of biology that deals with naming and classification of living things. Part B. What is the name given to the scientist who works in this field? So that has been our lesson for today. You can write to us. Our Facebook page is Elimu TV. You can also write to us. Our Twitter handle is @Elimu_KE. I have been your teacher, Madam Christine Okot. Thank you for watching and see you in the next lesson.